Every song, every poem, and every movie you have ever seen has lied to you about what love is. You think it's a mystical connection between two souls. Evolution knows the truth. It is a temporary, chemically induced psychosis, a biological trap designed to last exactly long enough to keep a helpless child from freezing to death. Most people assume that falling in love is an elevation of the self. You think you are finding your missing piece. You think you are waking up. You're actually shutting down. When you meet someone and feel that sudden, overwhelming spark, you call it chemistry. You are more right than you know. Your brain is literally altering its own physical structure to disable your defenses. It shuts down the prefrontal cortex. That is the area of your brain responsible for logic, critical thinking, and judgment. You stop seeing the person in front of you. You start seeing a hallucination. You ignore red flags. You overlook flaws. You excuse terrible behavior. You aren't being romantic. You are heavily medicated. Your brain floods your system with dopamine. That is the exact same neurotransmitter that drives cocaine addiction. It makes you euphoric. It makes you crave the other person like a literal narcotic. Then it dumps oxytocin into your bloodstream, forcing a feeling of deep, irrational trust. But the most disturbing part isn't what your brain adds, it's what it takes away. In 1999, a researcher named Donatella Marazziti gathered a group of people who had recently fallen madly in love. She drew their blood. She looked at their serotonin levels. Serotonin is the chemical that keeps you calm. It keeps you in control. The people in love had experienced a massive, plunging drop in serotonin. It was entirely gone. But she didn't just stop there. She compared their blood work to another group of patients in the exact same hospital. Patients who had been diagnosed with severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. The blood work was identical. The researchers could not tell the lovers apart from the psychiatric patients. Love doesn't just feel like an obsession. Clinically, biologically, it is one. You are trapped in a neurochemical loop. You cannot stop thinking about them. You cannot eat, you cannot sleep. If you stayed in this state forever, you would die. The human body simply cannot sustain that level of metabolic and neurological stress. The dopamine receptors would burn out. The exhaustion would kill you. So the brain puts a timer on it. The drugs always wear off. Anthropologist Helen Fisher scanned the brains of couples who had been together for different lengths of time. She found that the blinding, obsessive chemical storm of new love has a very specific shelf life. It does not last forever. It does not last a decade. It lasts anywhere from 18 months to about 4 years. After that, the receptors downregulate. The prefrontal cortex wakes back up. The serotonin levels return to normal. The hallucination ends. You look across the kitchen table, and for the first time in years, you see a normal, flawed, deeply annoying human being. You think the magic is gone. You think you made a mistake. You wonder if you married the wrong person, but you didn't. Your brain just went back to normal. You finally woke up. Now the question you have to ask is, why? Why would evolution build a machine that drugs you, forces you to obsess over a stranger, and then abruptly cuts off the supply a few years later? To answer that, you have to look at how humans are built. Millions of years ago, your ancestors stood up on 2 legs. Bipedalism was a great trick. It let them see over tall grass. It let them carry tools. But it came with a brutal anatomical cost. Walking upright meant narrower hips. Narrower hips meant smaller birth canals. To survive the birth, human babies had to be born much earlier in their development than other primates. A baby chimpanzee can cling to its mother's fur almost immediately. A newborn human is entirely useless. It is a soft, screaming, defenseless lump. It requires constant, exhausting, round-the-clock care just to survive the night. If your ancestors looked at that screaming lump rationally, they would have walked away. The physical toll was too high. The caloric cost was too steep. A single mother on the ancient Savannah trying to feed herself and protect a helpless infant was a dead woman. She needed the father to stay. He needed her to survive. Evolution didn't care if they were soulmates. It only cared that the baby lived. So it deployed the most powerful weapon it had. It drugged them. The chemical psychosis of early love wasn't poetry. It was a biological tether. It glued 2 people together through the most dangerous, sleep-deprived, miserable years of child rearing. It forced them to stay in the same cave. And how long does it take for a human child to learn to walk, eat solid food, and join the wider playgroups of the tribe? About 4 years. The exact moment the child is no longer a completely helpless infant. The biological tether snaps. The drugs flush out of the system. The mission is accomplished. Helen Fisher looked at divorce records across the globe. She looked at dozens of different societies, from modern cities to indigenous tribes. She found the exact same pattern everywhere. Divorces consistently peak in the 4th year of marriage. The 4-year itch isn't a modern cultural failing, it is an ancient factory reset. On the Savannah, this made perfect sense. Once the child was relatively safe, the parents were free to split up and find new mates. This increased genetic diversity. It built a stronger tribe. The system worked perfectly for 300,000 years. But now you are running that ancient software in a modern world. We built a society around 30-year mortgages. We built it around joint bank accounts. We built it around vows of "till death do us part." We expect the chemical high to last 50 years. We demand that a survival protocol designed for the wilderness somehow sustain a lifelong romantic comedy. It can't. It was never meant to. When the chemicals fade, couples panic. They think they have fallen out of love. They feel betrayed. They argue. They cheat. They tear their lives apart, desperately chasing that dopamine hit with a new stranger. They start the 4-year clock all over again. They think they are looking for their true soulmate. They are just running from their own sobriety. So look at where we are. You are going to wake up one day, and the drug will be gone. The person sitting next to you will not be a soulmate. They will just be a person who breathes too loudly, a person who forgets to buy milk, a person who annoys you. Most people run when that happens. They think the end of the illusion is the end of the love. But that is exactly backward. You cannot love a hallucination. You can only love a reality. The romance you see in the movies isn't love, it's just the bait. Real love is what happens when the trap opens, the drugs wear off, and you decide not to leave.